Hello, everybody, and welcome to Real Talk Radio. I'm your host, Hillary Ramo. Today, we're going to be talking about the healthcare system, new innovations with my guest, Rogelio Santos, who's CEO of AEVOLVE. He's going to be talking to us about how he has bridged the gap between blockchain technology and innovation for healthcare. So before we get to that, let me just introduce you to Rogelio. He is the co-founder, chairman, and CEO of AVEX. Under his leadership, he successfully developed and led the company towards its first FDA approval. Santos has also founded companies including a multinational software development and digital media firm, a national real estate technology services agency, a nonprofit organization, and web-based construction project collaboration platform. And he is also recognized as the inventor of a disaster response solution called the Butterfly House, which we'll be hearing about later on this hour, providing folding houses or rapid deployment shelter systems to disaster survivors. A big topic on today's platform with climate change and climate change relocation. In 2015, Santos was awarded the 10 Outstanding Young Men Award, the most prestigious award given in the Philippines. He has also received 2 Senate resolutions as recognition for his achievements. He has received many other notable awards, including recognition from the New Jersey-based Ernst & Young and New Jersey Biz Magazine as one of New Jersey's top 30 entrepreneurs. We have an incredible mind with us this next hour. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things. I had the honor of interviewing Rogelio in New York in early September. We had a great time discussing a lot of new things. Many things have happened since, and we're going to catch up on some of that as well. He was also featured on TED Talks and major news outlets like Wall Street Journal, CNN, Bloomberg, and now here on KCAA with me. Welcome, Rogelio.
Yeah. Good morning.
How are you? Welcome.
I'm doing good. I'm here in sunny Las Vegas on a business trip, and I'm happy to join you on the air.
Well, we're very happy to have you here, and we don't have enough time really to talk about all your fantastic accomplishments. But let's just get started with a basic overview of AEVOLVE. Tell us about your company, what you're doing, who you are, and why we need to pay attention.
Wow. Okay. So AEVOLVE is an answer. It's a solution that myself and my team created. And the solution is basically designed to link patients with medical innovations in the world. Now, the reason why that's so important is because there are so many medical innovations that are out there that actually have really good technology, great data, but sometimes they just get passed over or are not actually the prime picks for the current, I guess you can say, the current capital system that controls everything right now. And so what happens is the belief was if we can get this information to the patients and the patients had a way to actually, let's say, reserve a treatment or financially participate in a way that was safe for them, where they can get their money back or they can actually transfer that access. Well, what would happen is you would create a brand new generation, a whole new financing channel for medical innovations that would otherwise have been passed over to now be born into the world. Treatments that actually may not. Right now, pharma is very focused on what we call maintenance drugs. So they don't cure you, but they make you feel better for a little bit, so you keep coming back. You are recurring revenue. Patients are not people to be healed. Patients are assets. And from our perspective, there are technologies out there where certain things can be addressed, and they don't make a good financial case, but they are exactly what the world needs. And we believe that the world is deserving of knowing that these technologies are there. And through blockchain, we found a solution to make this possible.
When people hear the word blockchain, most of them go directly to Bitcoin and this unusual thing called cryptocurrency that most people don't understand. And, they don't have a thorough knowledge in blockchain technology, Bitcoin. So they kind of are lost in that, and they think that, well, Bitcoin crashed a few years ago, and this, we don't need to pay attention to that. But blockchain really was the treasure that came out of cryptocurrency. So explain to
Right.
us. There's a weird echo going on. I don't know, guys, on the board, if you can fix that, but it's really annoying. Sorry. Anyway, I don't know what it's going on, but I hear this strange noise. I think we might be crossing parallel dimensions, actually, Rogelio. So maybe we should talk about quantum realities down the road. Anyhow, so anyway, most people aren't versed in blockchain technology. They don't understand cryptocurrency. So when people ask me about blockchain, I say, well, it's kind of like a ledger. So anything that can be ledgered can be blockchained. And blockchain seems to be the golden nugget that came out of the cryptocurrency birth, early 2000s. And so explain to us just briefly what blockchain is and how it can help the healthcare system. Exactly.
Well, okay. So when it comes to cryptocurrencies, I think you're correct when it comes to the fact that people recognize or they think of Bitcoin right away when they hear the word blockchain, and that's because it's money. Okay, people will gravitate to money. So when it comes down to it, when a new technology is born, people actually first hear about the hype when the internet was booming. People started paying attention financially with IPOs, and that whole trend. At the end of the day, blockchain, it is a ledger, yes, and I think that the fundamentals most people kind of get that it's a list. Look, but a notebook can be a ledger, right? I can make a list in a notebook. I can make a list in my own phone. So what makes blockchain really powerful is that it is the fact that you can trust the integrity of a list without trusting who's doing it. So what I mean by that is that when something happens on the blockchain, it is replicated multiple times, 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times by computers all around the world that actually have nothing to do with one another, that you would never ever see or know. The reason why that's so important is that if somebody says, well, on my list something happened, and on his list it didn't happen, well, there's 9,999 other lists that say that you're lying, yours is wrong, and that's correct. And there's no way anybody can manipulate that because you don't know where those lists are. So it's a trustless system that you can trust that it actually is accurate. So that's why blockchain is so important. Because,
well, isn't it fair to say too that blockchain could prevent corruption in this sense?
oh yes, that's probably why it's going to have a slow adoption.
Yeah, right. Well, you just read my mind because, people really have a hard time trusting the healthcare system as it is, at least in the United States here. I know that around the world, different healthcare systems exist, but here in the U.S., people don't trust the pharmaceutical companies. They don't trust vaccines. They don't trust the co-payments and the insurance issues that we have here. People pay a lot of money for treatments. They don't have a lot of options. Oftentimes, their health insurance controls what kind of treatment they can actually get. And so we're really looking at a complete turnaround with your system because you offer a way to, one, get rid of corruption, and two, to the research and development part of your company opens up to smaller populations that have more rare disease that isn't quite funded properly because pharmaceutical companies haven't given it enough attention because they don't see enough profit in doing that. So let's take it to the average person.
Yeah.
So the average person is diagnosed with disease. They go to their doctor. The treatment isn't quite available yet. They get very sad and depressed, and they go home and they say, well, they tell their family, I have this disease. I don't know what my options are yet. So what do they do when it comes to your platform? Do they go to your platform and sign up for what?
Well, so let's say, for example, well, right now there are organizations that actually focus on patient advocacies that are targeted for specific diseases to to actually look for solutions for these type of products, right? So, for example, there's the Alzheimer's Association, there's the American Cancer Society, there's the ALS Foundation, and a lot of these organizations they raise money. They actually are they're trying to fund research. They're there to create support groups because there's a lot of diseases that actually have no solution. So your only solution is actually to create comfort, find options, and create guidance for the patient and the family. Now, these things exist right now. However, it doesn't mean it actually helps the solution. So, for example, if there's an array of like 20 solutions for a particular disease that actually is unmet right now, um, the reality is the loudest person in the room at this moment is your established big pharma who has a multi-billion-dollar a year marketing budget to go ahead and tell everybody that everyone else is wrong and they're the only ones that are right. Okay, that's what exists right now. And so imagine imagine the concept when you run into a situation where a new technology or a new science goes against a multi-billion-dollar revenue source. The threat is not the fact that what is that? They'll maybe they'll try to stop it or squash it. They're more subtle now. They'll actually try to create. They'll try to discredit. They'll try to get louder with their solutions. They create confusion. They create doubt. And I think that when a patient, one of the things that's beautiful about today's world with the internet and the and self-motivated research and a community that understands that's actually that they realize what's going on. A lot of us know something's wrong with the system, right? Something's wrong. Well, at the end of the day, what we're trying to allow patients to do is go on our platform, research, read, and discover new technologies. And let's say, for example, something is ready to go out. The research is good. Let's say it requires regulatory approval, like an FDA or whatnot. And let's say that was done. Well, they can, or even better, it's in what we call a compassionate use or orphan stage approval. Well, you can actually purchase or reserve a treatment. And when you reserve that treatment, what's happening is you become one of the first of many to be able to access these solutions. And let's say, for example, somewhere down the road, before you can actually access it, something happens, or you just don't need it anymore. Well, what happens is you can actually sell it because underneath the technology of all this is actually a blockchain platform. It's an exchange. So you press a button, and all of a sudden, you got your money. Now, this new form of liquidity, it's actually not new. I mean, there's financial systems that do exactly what we've done, except we've made it applicable towards the medical innovation space. So patients can now discover. They can financially participate and get access to something that they need. At the same time, medical innovators are now able to create a new source of financing for their projects. And this is the experience that we want patients to have. We have all types of 100% refunds, guarantees, so that in case the project is stifled, they can get their money back. I mean, all types of things that are actually put into this platform that are designed to protect the patient and give them the experience of actually being able to be part of the solution, of finding the solution for their problems.
What makes your cryptocurrency format different than other cryptocurrencies?
Well, I think I know when you say cryptocurrency, I mean we're talking about the platform itself, like the blockchain solution. So, for example, our solution on the blockchain, I like to tell technologists and other people that I don't think we're the newest rocket ship out there, but the application is what matters. The innovation is how we've applied this new thing called blockchain to solve this problem. For example, right now I can create a futures contract on the stock exchange, right, and on the commodities exchange or whatever for a future event for like a harvest of crop, right? And at the end of the day, what is that? I can bet and finance that farm and that yield so that I can actually earn a profit, right? And the farmers get their money. However, imagine taking all of that, and with blockchain, I'd be able to do that whole entire process that exists today for one reservation. That one reservation multiplies out to hundreds of thousands of reservations, millions of reservations for medical solutions. And basically, it creates a whole new set of liquidity. So I've taken financial products, markets that are out there, and actually made it so that it's unitized. So it's only so that it's converted so that one person can actually access one treatment and be able to sell it. It's very simple, but it's very powerful in the aggregate.
Well, you have done something different than most cryptocurrency platforms, and you've done it without an ICO. Talk to us about that and what that means.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. Look, blockchain. We made a funny comment earlier. It's like corruption is slow to adopt. I mean, at the end of the day, we all know that the crypto world has gotten a lot of heat by the governments around the world. They're basically saying, hey, this is a utility token. This is no, it's a security. Oh no, you can't raise money that way. You can't actually launch that token in this way, that way. What's happening is last year, the year before last, there was a massive boom in cryptocurrency ICOs that were fueling new projects. In 2018, billions of dollars were booming into the sector. You had your first multi-billion-dollar ICOs that were coming out early in the year, and all of a sudden, as the year passed on, the crackdowns by the U.S. government and other countries, they started getting heavier and heavier and heavier. Part of the reason why is because they really didn't know how to deal with it, right? They didn't know what to. It's not regulated. There's no way to actually keep people safe. Maybe if there were scams out there, and rightfully so, there were also a number of scams in the ICO space, and they definitely deserve to be weeded out, right? But what that caused was a artificial stifling of progress. And so I have spent the last decade of my life on a biotech project with millions of dollars spent on research and studies and regulatory work, etc. And prior to that, decade more by the scientists and the organizations that were researching and testing and developing this product. And so I wasn't about to put that effort into a gray scenario when it comes to regulatory. And at the same time, I am a avid technologist, and I knew that the blockchain space needed something with some meat. For example, I am a blockchain has white papers. We have published papers, right? So we have a little bit more meat when it comes to our work. And so what I did was we took a structured product and developed a underlying asset model with a token, and it is available through. Right now, we did this in Switzerland, and so it's available through the Swiss markets, which actually allows investors to purchase a security, a real deal security, right? Which is actually just like a stock, like a bond. It has an ISIN number. It is a fully registered asset, and then use that to actually gain exposure to our token, which is an underlying asset. So this is in this way, no government or regulatory board can actually say, hey, you can't raise money that way because this is the way money has been raised since the birth of capitalism, right? So.
Well, that's not a small task to take on there, Rogelio. So congratulations to you for being so able to do this, because I think a lot of companies have tried really hard to do great things, but they get stuck in the ICO, they don't raise enough money, things fall short, and it just doesn't end up happening the way it's supposed to happen. The original idea of cryptocurrency was to do it without a middle person, no banks, no usury, nothing involved, where people could just pay a person without anybody knowing or anybody having to have any of that business. And of course, we all know how privacy goes with today's technology. It just really doesn't fit into their business model. So we don't usually hear a lot of that. So, and I think my microphone is a Tesla tower pulling in all the other radio frequencies, because I can still hear this strange alternate conversation happening behind the scenes. I'm sorry.
Entangled.
Yeah. We've created a quantum physics wormhole, and we've opened up dimensional things. Okay, so thank you for explaining your company and congratulations on your ISIN and all the great advancements you've done and your team. Some of the people I know, and they're really a fabulous team. And you guys all have great energy. You have really good, positive outlooks on the world. And the reason that I want to point that out is because oftentimes, especially radio hosts who host other shows, don't always see the good in people who have such high up leadership. And I think what we need to do is take another look and not throw everybody out with the baby with the bathwater and say, well, everybody in biotech and everybody in cryptocurrency and everybody in here and there is a bad person. And
Right.
that's just simply not true. So when we have good people like yourself come into these industry spaces that really do need a conscience, and they really do need to really understand how people work and what makes them tick. And I think that you're doing that, and I congratulate you on that as well. Having a conscience in this kind of business is not always there. So
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Thank you so much for that. And,
Well,
just to extend on that, I'll tell you this. Um, working in the crypto community in the blockchain space, and also working in one of the most toughest sectors, which is biotech and pharma, right? Um, One of the things is that you see different cultures being born. You see things that are that are swinging left and right in a way where, hey, maybe it is a little too wild or whatnot. For me, as I've always done anything, I've actually though I like to lead by example. And in fairness, this thing that you're talking about, this AVEX AI structured product, this whole model, before I even announced it, we've been working on this thing for over a year and a half, not just on this model, because we believe, and I absolutely personally believe, when people understand how this was done, a lot of people can talk about it, but actually completing a very rigorous a financial product like this, once they see how it's done, and because it's already been done, they're going to realize that there was always a way that was a handshake, agreement between what exists today on for the government and the regulatory side, and what they desire for innovation and creation for their technologies. So for me, thank you for the kind words regarding the positive outlook of myself and the team. And in fairness, all we ever try to do is actually do it and then lead by example, and that's the only way that things actually change.
well, I hope that leadership value follows suit with other companies and other people who have the power to change things. Speaking of consciousness and kindness and moving forward into big places with some sense of sensitivity and empathy for people, how does consciousness play a role in your own life? I mean, are you a spiritual person? Do you pull in these higher values? How does that all work for you?
Personally, yes, I'm very spiritual. I believe in God, and um, I have a very strong drive. The things that I do, I think that when you ask anybody what their motivation is, what their drive is, you will get very different answers. So a lot of drive for many people, believe it or not, is based on either trauma or fear, right? Um, and trauma, they're trying to heal from, or there's an anger there, or there's a greed, a desire, a lust, I have to say, but there is such a thing as well, you could almost say a holy motivation, right? And when you look at what is built on a rock, what is strong, you know a motivation is a very vague concept. It's a nebulous thing, right? But when you actually find something where there is a absolute definiteness of purpose, for me, when you talk about uh, um, you know drive, spirituality, and in turn consciousness, because I know that me personally, my foundation is very strong in that sense. I don't actually have to say those words to attract the people that are needed for projects and movements, because at the end of the day, it's felt and it draws, right? And my all my work can only ever be done with great people around me, and I'm blessed that I've actually that I recognize this, and I focus on that particular talent, so that more and more blessings and resources come, because my work isn't for me, really. It's for everybody else.
That selflessness seems to be at the center of a lot of great things. We've had a lot of wonderful people in our history who have showed up and done the work, and we don't necessarily know what their motivation is. And sometimes when we have very successful people walking around the planet, we don't know what their motivation is. Sometimes we see glimpses into that, and other times we don't. And what people who look up to you and said, oh, wow, he's doing great things and I really want to be that way. You inspire a lot of people. So for those people that look up to you and hope to be great in their leadership and innovation, what would you have to say to them that would encourage them to go out and follow their dreams?
First of all, don't look up to me. That's scary, right? I don't. I'm as human as the next guy. We all have our flaws, right? At the same time, I believe that when you look at purpose, I think many motivational speakers, many people that have spoken about about this topic, it's always about why. Why? What is your why? The stronger the why, the stronger the likelihood of success for whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. When something becomes a I should to I must, or from I must to if I don't do it, I either live or die. Those kind of choices really determine how strong conviction really is. And at times, if you base it on something temporary, then motivation is temporary. And you better hope that motivation lasts until you complete. But I have to tell you, I am a person that has been part of projects that last years, decades. So I had to draw deeper and deeper within. So what do I say to them? Find something strong. In fairness, nothing is stronger than connecting with your own infinite self, and the infinite greatness that extends beyond that into the universe. That power, call it God, call it your higher being or whatnot. That power is stronger than anything. So if you choose to tap into that, then that's the only thing I can ever say would last. Anything great then takes a lot of time.
Ideology seems to rule the world. A lot of people look at ideology as God, and they tend to pull in people around them that believe in the same ideology. And for those that don't believe in the same ideology, they tend to exclude. So it becomes kind of like an exclusive club. Mm-hmm. And you see that in a lot of structures for not only corporate entities, but also government entities and things of that sort. Everything comes down to some kind of belief system. When you first started your project, Quest, how was that for you as far as accomplishment? What was your first real sense of accomplishment in your path as you were growing through all this?
My first sense of accomplishment, you mean as a in my life or
as a human being? Yeah, I mean, like, what was your first real sense of, wow, I did that, and you were proud of yourself? You had a sense of, pat yourself on the back, and this is something that encouraged you to move forward in other projects.
I tell you this, I know this is a bad feature, but I actually am really bad at celebrating accomplishment. People say, like, once you hit a certain milestone or you do this, you should really celebrate it. It's important. I'm actually one of those people that the moment the goal is hit, I think to myself, okay, next move.
Well, you've had cake. I've seen pictures of cake at your celebrations. Your ISNN cake was great at Las Vegas. Now, I just want to tell people listening, Rogelio was one of the speakers at the World Crypto Conference recently in Las Vegas, and he sat down on a panel of many of the world's great thought leaders in cryptocurrency, along with Charlie Stream, and I think he joined your team. But celebrating accomplishment, I know you have cake.
Yes, that's true. No, we had cake. That is for sure. In fact, I try to make it a practice to make sure that if for myself, I'm bad at it, but I need to make sure that the team celebrates as well. It's more for everyone else, right? But it is important. It is important to actually celebrate. So when you ask me about the accomplishments, I'm thinking, okay, there times where I felt that way. Um, I believe that there were, yes, I mean, absolutely. I have moments where I look back. I mean, I'll give you a couple stories. I once organized a rally in the Philippines, and 600,000 people showed up. And I stared at the field from the back of the from the top of the from the top of these steps, and this field of a sea of people, and I could feel energy, just the power of of that moment, the people, the uniting. There were times when I've had very quiet accomplishments where the victory was just so, it was so hard to do, and I know that no one will ever know. And in those moments, I I thank God and I appreciate the fact and I thank the fact that I have, I had the ability to actually get through that, and the resources and faculties to do it. I mean, I have a lot of moments, so many moments where my 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 heart is warm, my mind is immersed, and my soul is shivering because of the fact that I recognize that a not an accomplishment, but a miracle took place. You know.
Well, I don't know. I've never gathered 600,000 people in one spot. However, I can relate to what you just described, the energy, the being in touch with your heart, being in touch with your soul, and that's a rare quality today, I think. Unfortunately, we've become so isolated in our massive connection that we sometimes forget to include the heart energy and to count the soul energy, regardless of what we believe
Mm.
or what our ideology is, right? And so, would you consider that some kind of magical connection to the larger reality that we are all a part of?
Well, if we don't acknowledge, the greater part of us, I mean, in a lot of ways, life can be a little small and sad, right? Like, what is it really that we're living for? At the end of the day, I always say one thing: there's more to this world than this world. And if you don't acknowledge the fact that that there's a lot more that you don't understand and going on, then you'll stop searching. And that journey is priceless. The discovery portion and the not knowing is frustrating. A lot of people don't like the stress of not understanding, but if you embrace it and you keep pushing, answers are inevitable to reveal. And that's we have to embrace.
It's like the mystical seeker's quest. So you have some experience with quantum computing, and
Mhm.
that's one of my favorite topics to talk about. But the technology that allows quantum computing for happening, how is it close to the human experience of quantum realities? Let's talk about that. Let's go into that for the last segment of the show, because I think it's important for people to be able to wrap their minds around technology. Technology is taking over the world. We've never
Yes.
before been in this position. Humanity is in its first real experience of being so immersed in information and technology, and a lot of it they don't understand. But
Yeah.
isn't that the same way with quantum realities? Isn't that the same way
Mhm.
with these other alternative experiences that sometimes have been called mystical?
I'll tell you this. I think that when you look at technology and the world today, between artificial intelligence and blockchain, even, all forms of new tech, and you're mapping the human mind, even advancements in genetics, etc. A lot of those technologies are, we relate to in a very basic way. But I will actually encourage your viewers that the more you dive into the understanding of this new quantum field that's actually developing, you'll begin to realize how everything is actually yesterday. Everything is so small when it comes down to it. Well, when it comes down compared to what we're discovering, I mean, consider the fact that 100 years ago there were elements, objects, there were concepts that were thought of as frivolous. It was considered fringe science. If you talked about it out loud as a scientist, you were discredited, you were insulted, you were actually shamed, right? But now, those very same concepts, we built a computer around it. It works.
You sound surprised. It's like, I think, was quantum computing an accident? Did somebody tune into something and make a realization, an aha moment, and suddenly everything was working? It's such a new thing, and there's so much competition to get to conscious technology. I don't think they ever will, because, I believe humanity is so special. And I think it takes more than one person to create a field of interactive psychic phenomena that we still have yet to fully understand. One person can do a lot, but two or more can do much more, I think. Don't you think? It's kind of quantum entanglement, spooky action at a distance, all of that stuff.
You need to have more than one because it amplifies. It's like if you have a radio, or like you have a radio station, right? And what happens is when you have a message, and it resonates, and you have other people vibrating to that message to the point where they're filled and they're resonating as well. I mean, that's the only way movements can actually take place. It is very much in the same concepts between with quantum wave theory, amplification, all those mathematics, right? But I want to talk about a little bit about what really blew my mind when it came to quantum computing, but it's more about the quantum physics side, right? So what really intrigued me was when you look at one of the fundamental experiments in quantum physics is the double slit theory, the double slit experiment. Right, it's when they shine a photon or electron into two little holes, and it has to choose to go into door A or door B. And when you observe which hole it goes into, it behaves differently than when you actually don't observe it and just observe where it lands. What happens is, what that experiment showed is that, oddly enough, the probabilities of a pathway are actually more real than the thing itself. It's so real that potential future pathways, from our perspective, actually collide. They collide to the point where when they collide and it bounces off each other, it leaves gaps where these things could never go and where they can only go. And this is a very important concept because if you think about it, the fundamentals of this theory is kind of it extends into how quantum computing is kind of indecisive, and it's built on these uncertainties. But at the same time, one of my favorite interpretations of this, these are multiple dimensions, and they are actually crossing each other, right? They're hitting each other, and so could you imagine that we have quantum computers right now that actually the fundamental interpretation of it, of how it's working, is still largely misunderstood. We're building things that we don't understand.
He laughs. Well, doesn't that mean then that observation is key?
Observation is key. Sometimes lack of observation is also key.
So how does that relate to digital surveillance? I mean, if we're constantly under some kind of camera surveillance and we're being observed by whatever, does that mean that changes us fundamentally because we're being watched?
It's possible. It is possible. It's no different than, like you're in a room and I say, don't hit the glass jar. Don't knock the vase off the pedestal, right? I've kind of set you in your direction in a weird way, right? So, in one sense, observation it collapses what we call the wave function, but at the same time, there's too many people. There's not enough cameras, and possibilities are constantly are infinite.
Well, it could explain some confusion. It could explain some a massive confusion on a collective scale. Now, spooky action at a distance is one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
And that experiment proved that once a particle is observed, then it changes that particle all the way back to the past, even back to its very first existence. So in a way, I'm not explaining it thoroughly as far as the scientific is. There's lots more to it. However, doesn't that explain some kind of massive connection in time?
Well, that's the thing, right? When the funny thing is when you talk about these type of concepts, mathematically, they are. You could almost shrug your shoulders and say, "Oh yeah, okay, well, in the quantum world, there is a dimension that moves backwards in our time. There's one that moves sideways. There's one out of sequence, and it's normal. It actually it makes sense in that way. From us as physical, as larger objects, we don't perceive it that way. But here's something very important. For the longest time, people would say that the quantum rules actually only apply to small electrons and the nanoscale world, right, of the quantum world. But just recently there was a beautiful experiment that was actually just conducted, and I can't exactly cite it because I don't have it in front of me. But they were actually able to show that giant balls of atoms, like large masses of objects, will actually follow the same quantum rules. Now this changes a lot. That means you and I physically can actually apply these same quantum rules in thinking. And right now, because we just entered a time when it's fringe. Went from fringe science to actual real deal applicable technology, right? So now, when you talk in this way, the physicists will say, "Oh, well, that's quantum mysticism." They're trying to associate these theories with religious connections, etc. But I will tell you this: there's a saying, if a technology that is sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic. And if you take a look at the magic of old, or religions and that actually had documented, like the Indians with the Vedas and the way they had their to me a lot of their religion is a science. They actually had a lot of the explanations that we're just unraveling right now in quantum studies. My most favorite thing in the quantum world, and especially quantum computing, is every expert and physicist and scientist 1 year saying, well, we got here, but we can't get there. A year later, they got there, and they'll say, okay, well, we can't get there. A year later, they got there. It's almost like we're breaking our own limits, and the only thing limiting is our own perception of smallness, of where we are. So I think...
Hasn't nanotechnology added into that, though? I mean, we've seen fields grow in the last few decades that never existed for us before. But how do you explain shamans and medicine men in our past, or women in our past, that were able to close their eyes and meditate and use their consciousness to go into a plant and then draw the microscopic inner workings of a plant?
It's funny. You mentioned shamans, right? And you mentioned almost a medicine man. Right. And, one thing that's very funny about that is if you take a look, for the last 100 or so years, civilization today has actually prided itself on basing itself on the scientific method. Right. They will identify a particular condition, an experiment, a solution, hypothesize, et cetera, until it's a replicable result. That is the finality of it. Right. It's a replicable result if you do X. But here's the funny thing. Right now, I don't know how many of your reviewers know this, but there is what you call there's actually a replication crisis in science right now. Have you heard about this?
No, really? But I'm hanging on every word. I'm listening very closely.
So actually, it started out with a psychological study that actually it won a Nobel Prize or something, and it was shamed because it couldn't be replicated. But then it opened up another can of worms where there were other experiments that couldn't be replicated. It got to the point where there was even a major drug company that said, their very own research couldn't be replicated, and it was only done less than a decade ago. So this crisis has now bled into published papers and scientific experiments that span back decades in almost every field of science. So this is a very unique thing because you mentioned shaman as the medicine man, and one would say, well, the civilization today would say, well, that's magic and that's fluffy stuff, and that actually has no basis. Meanwhile, the very basis of our science today is being challenged. We can't replicate. And
Well, yep, I'm reminded of the power of intuition and synchronicity. And, we talk about shamans and old medicine and old magic and earth-based things of that sort. And at some point, spirituality was separated from science, and it wasn't allowed to commingle or coexist. And we created a kind of a fork in the pathway. And indigenous cultures all over the world have been persecuted and systematically wiped out by corporate, capitalistic type entities that come in and gobble up their resources and try to quiet and shut down their voices. And, over time, I think what we're finding is that we have to find a way to merge that back together and respect the human qualities that we cannot necessarily explain by experiments and science. Don't you think, really?
I'll tell you this. I not only believe that a change has to happen, I think it is happening. I mean, look, when you talk about, like right now, I am on the radio with you as a CEO of a biotech company and a blockchain company, and I'm talking about quantum computing and consciousness, right? And the reason why I'm doing that is because I believe that it is important that the financial and the business world meet humanity head to head, because right now it's become so, when these kind of topics, people see a lot of concern discussing. You can't even talk about spirituality before in a business meeting. It's like it has no place. But you spend your days there, we affect people's lives. It has every place there. And when we talk about what's happening now, when growing up, when you or just in daily living, when you go out to eat and you have a takeout from a fast food restaurant and you have a plastic fork and a piece of paper and you eat something and you immediately goes into the trash. Everybody must have some sort of subconscious thinking like, okay, where does that go? What's happening? And today, we're looking at the oceans. We're seeing where it goes. Companies now, like I was in New York and I saw some of the biggest financial institutions. They're now branding themselves towards impact investing, actually addressing environmental stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, when you talk about where we are, thank God that we've actually evolved. Maybe it's the internet, maybe it's social media, whatever it is, information that is normally sheltered from us, or we're conditioned to not think about. Well, those controls are being loosened, and now we're having more of a free thought. In fact, it is the very reason why I believe that those control systems are antiquated. Today, if a patient goes to a doctor, right, the doctor used to say, this is what's right and wrong, you listen to me, period. But today, because of the internet, they'll say, hey, excuse me, doc, but do you know about this research? Hey, did you hear about this? And the patient has more power now to actually really make a informed decision versus just blindly listening. And I'll tell you right now, just like there are good and bad and highly skilled and poorly skilled people in the profession, just so in the medical space as well. And could you imagine that you get stuck with wrong advice, which happens all the time, and you get stuck with surgeries or things that you don't need, which happens all the time as well. And next thing you know, today you have a little bit more. And all we're trying to do is try to empower that. So spirituality has a place in business. Spirituality has a place in our conversation. And to elevate the thinking and to elevate ourselves as a human being, we have to be bold in introducing these conversations in every part of our lives.
I feel like I've waited to hear this conversation my whole life. Thank you so much for that. I want to end the segment talking about the cannabis industry and how cannabis innovation, research, technology, all the things that I know lay waiting on the other side of legalization. Are you going to allow that to come into the AEVOLVE platform so people can participate in cannabis research and study?
Absolutely. Yes, yes, and yes. I mean, all I know is that in the work that I've been in, medical solutions, things that benefit patients, they come from everywhere. There's a plant that was in our backyard that cured some major thing. There's a element that comes from a beach sand that's dug up, and all of a sudden this particular dirt actually is a medicine. Why should cannabis be excluded as part of a solution? Right? Especially if there's research now being born and there's so many benefits. Look, it's always being knocked for not having enough studies or trials or et cetera, et cetera. But hey, you and I know people have been smoking weed for the longest time. There's plenty of data.
And plenty of opportunity for study as well. And I want to take a short moment to mention THC. And I've been a big advocate for cannabis research and study. And THC is being demonized like it's a job. And people are thinking THC is about getting high. And what it does is really opens up the brain receptors to let the CBD in. Quickly, what is your opinion on the current CBD THC dilemma in the United States?
Dilemma, I mean, look, all walls, challenges, obstacles are usually man-made. So the dilemma is not the fact that it's illegal. It's who's behind making it this type of challenge and what are their interests. That's what I think. I think that when you ask the question, when we think about this, we have to ask ourselves, okay, well, if we know there's enough going on here that actually is working, why is it being demonized? Who is demonizing it, and why do they want it to be demonized? I think those are if we focus our minds on the right questions, then we'll get the right answers.
Excellent. Well, let's make a point to do that, guys. Thank you so much. We are out of time. Rogelio, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your wisdom with us this past hour. And we wish you the best of luck in all your endeavors.
Thank you so much. And everybody visit AEVOLVE.health, AEVOLVE.health.
All right. You're listening to KCAA. I'm Hillary Ramo. This is Real Talk Radio, guys. Thank you so much for being here. And I look forward to next time.